Story 1. Quick note: I am merely the witness in this short story. About 14 years ago, I was working at my local Walmart. I was put in charge of watching the self-checkout on a slow day. I will admit that back then I was inexperienced with people and lazy, but my few months there had taught me a lot about how nasty folks can get. A good mother came rushing to the self-checkout with her sick child in her cart. He did not look well, and I heard him saying as they approached, "I don't feel good, Mom. I want to go home." The good mother clearly understood that her child had become sicker since they came in and was trying to rush to get him home now. She was attempting to soothe him while simultaneously fumbling with groceries and bare essentials like soup and boxes of tissues. "I know, sweetie. I'm sorry. Mommy is going as fast as she can," she said. Well, along came a wealthy man. He had on what had to be the most expensive jacket I had ever seen. Full business attire, gold watch, tie, pricey shoes, perfect haircut, fit, carrying a lot of coffee. Everything about him made me glad this was self-checkout because my track record with wealthy folk treating me poorly here was almost 100%. He began checking out directly across from the good mother and sick child, his back facing them. Suddenly, the sick child started to squirm and look around wildly. Mom, I need the restroom." The good mother looked up from the checkout and saw her child was not going to make it through her checkout. She practically flew around the cart, picked him up, and he projectile vomited across the self-checkout all over the wealthy man's expensive jacket. My jaw dropped. It couldn't be real. As I began to react, I was watching the wealthy man. He dropped his coffee and was stunned for a moment when something I was not ready for happened. He turned around, quickly removing the jacket, dumped it on the floor, and walked quickly over to the good mother and sick child, kneeling because they were now on the ground, the good mother comforting her crying child with her eyes practically begging for mercy at this point. Wealthy man. "Is he okay?" I walked up with towels, already on the radio for cleanup, and handed him one. He used it to help clean up the good mother. "Good mother. He might have the stomach flu. I just needed to pick up some things to take care of him. I'm so sorry." Wealthy man. "It's okay. Let's get him cleaned up." The good mother seemed to finally really see the man and how he was dressed for the first time, and what had happened to him. "Oh my God. Do you work here?" Wealthy man, wiping vomit off her back while I started on the floor. "No, ma'am. Just a dad myself. Hate to see a kid not feeling well." The good mother was so embarrassed that she didn't really speak again, other than a meager thank you as we finished cleaning up, and the wealthy man helped her finish checking out personally. I helped him put his certainly ruined jacket in a garbage bag to take home, and he checked out as well. I asked him if there was anything else I could do for him, and the wealthy man politely declined and left the store. I will never forget how that man reacted that day. For all his obvious wealth, he was his last priority at that moment, even as a victim himself. He didn't complain about the mess, or that he might get the child's flu, or his ruined jacket, nothing. And he certainly did more to help than me, the actual employee. I took this lesson to heart for all future interactions with people, and it has made a tremendous difference as I became a father myself. Story 2. I'd bought an all-singing, all-dancing printer, but there was a problem. The next day, I took it back. While the man was looking at it, I told him it was blocked with paper, and I hadn't used it yet. As I waited for the printer to be sorted, I browsed the camera part of the shop. I noticed a camera was not under its label, so, being a person who always puts things in the right place, I moved cameras around and got them under their labels. It amazed me that people just don't look where they put things they have looked at in the right place. Into the shop walked a bottle blonde who tapped me on my shoulder. "The bottle blonde will be Blondie." "I will, of course, be me, and the staff will be S." Bear in mind, I was not in any way dressed like a staff member. Blondie picked up a top-of-the-range camera. "Are there any of these cameras in the back?" Me. "Pardon." Me. I don't know." Blondie. "What do you mean there must be more? I want to buy one." Me. "Oh, I don't work here. I'm just waiting for my printer to be sorted." Blondie. "Well, find out for me." I'm lost at this point. Didn't she hear me, or is she just confused? Me. See those two people behind the counter with black and blue shirts? Ask one of them. They work here. Blondie, you're very rude. I'm going to report your rudeness. At this, she walked to the counter. Blondie, why can't polite employees be employed here? That woman was very rude to me. I'm on holiday and don't expect rudeness from employees like her. The young employee looked at her. Madam, she doesn't work here. Blondie, that's no excuse for her rudeness. Why is she moving cameras around if she doesn't work here? Me, I told you I was waiting for my printer to be sorted, madam. I was just putting cameras in their right places. The employee I handed the printer to came back into the shop. I'm sorry, you should not have been sold this printer. Would you like a new one? Me. Yes, please. Blondie cut me off. Blondie. That woman was very rude to me. I demand to be served first. I'm not good at confrontation, so I went and sat on a seat and let her get what she wanted. The employee came to me and quietly said, Don't worry, we get people like her all the time. I'll bring your new printer out. I thanked him. He picked up the large box and was about to carry it to my car. Blondie, why hasn't she paid for this? The nice young man didn't answer her. I didn't say anything either and just walked to my car. Story 3. I don't know if this story belongs here. It is an I don't work here lady story of sorts, but if you don't think it belongs, I understand if you wish to delete it. It all happened many years ago. We're talking mid to late 80s, and it's not a typical I don't work here story. There's no exploding angry customer or any instant karma. Before I begin, I should just say that as a child, I was very close to my grandmother. Both my parents worked, and when I got out of primary school, I went to my grandparents' house until my mother picked me up. I also stayed with my grandparents during the school holidays. My grandmother taught me the basics of cooking, gave me a love of literature, and showed me the joy to be had from music. In about 1983, my grandparents emigrated to New Zealand to live near their son. My mother, their daughter, sadly died in 1981, and I was well settled in secondary school by then, so they felt making a move like that would be good for them. It was tough saying goodbye to my grandparents. I was very close to both of them, but especially my grandmother. Some years later, 1988 or thereabouts, I had started university. Just before the end of my first year, my grandparents came back to the United Kingdom for a visit. They were staying with my dad. Although he wasn't their son, he thought of them as his parents. Before Dad knew about their proposed visit, he had decided to have some work done to his house. He wanted double glazing installed and some work on the roof done. So, when they arrived, there was a lot of activity going on around the house. About a week after my grandparents arrived back, my college broke up for the summer vacation, and I traveled back home. I was excited to see Dad, but I was really excited to see my grandparents again. It had been a few years since I last saw them. We'd exchanged letters but not seen each other since saying goodbye at the airport when they left for New Zealand. I got a taxi from the railway station to my dad's house, and the first thing I saw when I got home was the building site that was the front of his house, complete with builders. I didn't even need to open the front door. There wasn't one. It was being replaced. I left my backpack in the hall and went into the kitchen. My grandmother always liked being in the kitchen. The kitchen was her domain and was the place she felt most at home. The kitchen was also at the back of the house and was the farthest away from all the work at the front of the house, so I went straight there. I opened the kitchen door and just stood there, smiling at my lovely, gentle, kind grandmother. She had aged so much, but was still, unmistakably, my grandmother. My smile slowly disintegrated when I saw the reaction on her face. It was a look of fear and anger. Then she grabbed my grandfather's hand and said, "He's coming in. Why is he coming in? Who does he think he is? Get out." My grandmother, who I had seen every day of my life for the first 15 years of my life, who I loved so much, didn't even know who I was. She thought I was one of the builders and was terrified of me. The fear on her face broke me, ripped my heart in two. That was both my very first I don't work here story and also how I discovered my brilliant and loving grandmother was suffering from dementia. Edit. Thank you for the awards and all of your very kind comments. Some of your stories of your own loved ones' experiences with dementia and Alzheimer's have been heartbreaking. Thank you all for sharing. Story 4. To start off, a little backstory. I worked at my local university in the stadiums during sporting events, but during football, I got to take a 1-hour break and make some money parking cars behind a house my family rents to students. This story takes place while I was walking from the football stadium to the house. Needless to say, this isn't a recent story. Also, obligatory mobile and sausage thumbs warnings. Cast. The crazy lady and our antagonist crazy neighbor. He's not a bad guy. He's just really weird and actually helps out in this situation. Me, the poor sap just trying to earn $1 so I can have some fun while I'm in college. Anyway, on to the main event. I had just finished the last of my setup duties at my stadium job when I went to start parking cars. I needed a little cash to give as change, so I stopped at a convenience store that's on my way, which hosts a major tailgate party as it's right next to the stadium. When I was leaving, I decided to take a small shortcut behind a laundromat to shave a few seconds off of my time. And as I rounded the corner, there she was in her silver Nissan Altima. Crazy lady. She started blaring her horn at me, and I just about jumped out of my skin because I was only about 2 feet in front of her car. She rolled down her window, and before she could say anything, I asked if I could help her with something in a more than mildly annoyed voice. Crazy lady, I need you to move some of these cars. I have laundry I need to do, and I need a parking space. I said the famous words that this subreddit is known for. I don't actually work here, ma'am. Crazy lady. Yes, you do. Why would you be wearing that if you didn't? Note, I'm wearing blue jeans, a university branded shirt, and a university baseball hat. There is nothing particularly special about my uniform, and the only way to tell I work in the stadium is by my radio and badge, neither of which I was wearing. Me. Ma'am, look around. Everyone is wearing university gear. Now I have to go because I have things to do. She says something unintelligible and starts blasting her horn again as I walk the half block to the house and grab my parking sign. About 15 minutes later, I see a very familiar-looking car pull up rather aggressively, and the crazy lady gets out and starts yelling at me that I'm a good-for-nothing employee and should be fired from my job for being completely incompetent. Just as I'm about to lay into her, crazy neighbor comes up and puts her on blast. Crazy neighbor. Hey, you're blocking the road. I got cars, I gotta park, and they can't get around you to come in. So get your heap out of the way, or I'm calling the cops. Crazy lady. And who the heck do you think, yo? Crazy neighbor. I'm calling the cops. Crazy neighbor proceeds to whip out his antique flip phone and starts to dial. At this point, crazy lady hops back in her car and takes off again, almost hitting several of the cars parked along the road. I thank crazy neighbor for stepping in like that because it could have been a long, drawn-out argument otherwise, and we got back to parking cars in our respective lots. I never did see crazy lady again after that, and I don't particularly care that I haven't. Story 5. This happened a few years ago. It isn't very exciting, but I think it's worth sharing the story. I used to be an accountant at a mid-sized healthcare company whose colors are the exact same blue and white as a well-known Midwestern fast food chain with cheese curds and custard. I usually wore a button-up shirt and tie, and I even had a few shirts that were the company's colors with the logo on the shirt pocket. They made me feel part of the team, and I liked showing off that I worked there. I went to lunch at the fast food chain, and because it was lunchtime, there was a pretty decent line. I waited about 10 minutes to order, got a little number for my table, and sat down. Surprisingly, my food came out before anyone else in front of me, and as soon as I got the food, the employee asked if I needed anything else, a rare occurrence for fast food. During my meal, 3 separate employees came up to my table in the back corner of the restaurant to ensure that my meal was satisfactory. When I was finished eating, a woman cleaning tables took my tray for me and dumped the trash and food, etc. Another thing that has never happened to me at a fast food restaurant of any kind. Then she thanked me for coming and immediately wiped down my table. As I thanked her, she told me her name and said she hopes I come back with a wonderful review. It occurred to me as I was walking out that I was wearing my shirt that was the same color scheme as the restaurant brand, and they must have pegged me as a corporate executive who had come in to do some kind of performance check. Again, not a very exciting story, but I really enjoyed the service and had a laugh about it driving back to work.